Hi, and welcome to On the Couch, Conversations with Brenda Porter. Take the time today to like us, comment below, subscribe, so that we can continue to have conversations. Today's guest is Jamil Jude. Jamil is a highly accomplished director, producer, playwright, and dramaturg, focusing on bringing socially relevant art to the community. Jamil is the artistic director at Kenny Leon's True Colors Theater Company, and he is the co-founder of the New Griots Festival, which is dedicated to celebrating, advocating, and advancing the careers of emerging Black artists in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. Hello, and welcome, Jamil.
Hey, thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited because you and I haven't really had a chance to sit down and talk. We've been in each other's presence. We've been on different panels, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit back and pick your brain on how life is going.
Well,
So
hopefully you'll still want to have a second conversation after this first one.
I am sure I will. So you are the artistic director of Kenny Leon's True Colors Theater Company. And you come to us from St. Paul. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Yes.
Yeah. Most recently, that was the last stop. I spent 6 years in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay. So where were you before that?
I spent 2 years prior to that in Washington D.C. That's where I got started with my theater journey.
Mhm.
And prior to that, I was in college in upstate New York. And but I'm from Tallahassee, Florida. That's where I grew up, but born in the Virgin Islands. So I've kind of been all over the place. Uh,
Ah, man of travels.
yeah, definitely. I love moving around. But I feel like I found a home. My family and I, we feel like we found a home in Atlanta. And whenever a new opportunity comes up, it's like, well, we're not going to be able to get what we get here anywhere else. So um, I feel like we have reached our final stop on this.
How, since you've been all over, how do you find that theater differs here in Atlanta than elsewhere?
Yeah, the thing about the Twin Cities, and oftentimes, you get in these bubbles. So in my bubble in the Twin Cities, it was real art forward. I don't know if it was just the cold and people wanting to find shelter inside of the warm buildings of the theater, but there were so many small to mid-sized theaters. There was great state funding, so it wasn't as risky to create art projects or to create plays in Minnesota. uh, there's a joke that says Minnesota's the land of 10,000 lakes and the land of 10,000 theater companies, and it's not too far off. So I feel like there was always something to do, something to see in the city, and there was a lot of great collaboration because if you worked at one theater company, you probably worked at several others. Here in Atlanta, I think some of it is the distance, right? Like if you live in the northeast part of the metro area, it might be that much more difficult for you to get down to the southwest. So I don't feel that same sense of, oh, there's always something to do. There's so many theaters in town, and so much work to see. It's like, hey, what's in my geographic area? What are the shows that I must go see? If you are engaged in the arts and performers or things like that, maybe you want to go support a specific performer wherever they are taking the stage. But I don't feel that same level of like an abundance, an overabundance of work. And some of that is just about the risk, right? Like funding is not great here. Um, you know, Fulton County tries to do and make up for how poorly the state funds the arts. Um, but Fulton County can only do so much. City of Atlanta can only do so much for those of us who are supported by those entities. And I know, places like Gwinnett County and Lawrenceville are doing a really great work, but that is not shared around the Atlanta metro. Um, and also, just to finish this up, in DC, theater is very competitive. Everyone is trying to outdo one another. Everyone's trying to be better, go bigger, and not as friendly. Here in the Atlanta metro, I don't feel like we are extremely competitive. I do feel like we are friendly. I don't think there's an overabundance, and the spirit of collaboration doesn't feel that strong. But I'm still very new. into my time here. So I don't want to make any grand proclamations.
How do you see, or do you see that problem being solved?
Yeah. Well, I think we are going to have to do more intentional partnerships because of the funding, right? Like the coronavirus has made it so that ticket selling is going to be reduced just based on capacity for a while. I imagine that we'll all suffer through that. And then for those of us who have a bulk of our funding through contributions, that'll probably be depressed in a way as corporate organizations, corporations, government entities, everyone will be reporting a loss. So they may not be as willing to support the arts in that same way in which they have. So I do think the reduced resources will inspire more collaboration. Like, hey, I used to be able to produce with $10. Now I only have seven, and you have seven. Together we have 14. What could that do more than what we would have each had if we only had 10? So I think that we'll see some more of that. Um, I also think, if we want to be frank with it, organizations like mine and yours are probably going to be more in demand than they have been in the last several years as people want to they want to, let's treat them as if they're doing it honestly. They're going to honestly want to represent the community better. Um, I think people are hurt that the New York Times article a couple of years ago said only 12% of the plays were written by Black people, produced in Atlanta, that has a majority Black population. I think they're embarrassed at the town halls and the way in which our town has been talked about, whether it's just internally or externally. I think there will be a desire to change that. And I imagine that people will collaborate in hopes of being able to tell a different story.
Collaborations had already begun. You
Right.
know, True Colors had some collaborations, Outfit had collaborations, Aurora had collaborations. So I think that I think you might exactly be right. That might
But
be
I think the
the way
point
of the future.
equitable collaborations are where we have to be, right? Like it is not just enough for us to say, hey, we brought in a theater company, we gave them access to our space or what have you. Because oftentimes it's the smaller companies that lose out on that. You get into the big regional theater for a run of a show, you get more audience, but do you also get the access to the email addresses? And even if you have the access, if you don't have the marketing staff that's able to follow up with people and get them a part of your mailing lists and donors and stuff like that, if you don't have the resources to then scale up with that information, it really wasn't as helpful to you as it could have been. But the other organization now has access to your patrons that always support your work, and then they have the mechanisms in place that they can make your patrons also their patrons. Um, and that those are the things that we have to continue to talk through as well, as far as what does a true collaboration mean. Um, and over time, I think we will get better, especially as we can be more honest about what our needs are.
That's a really, really good point because a lot of the minority-run theaters in town are a one-person show, and most of the time, still trying to do a 9 to 5 so they can pay the bills, and so it becomes difficult. And so it's really nice when you have an operating budget that allows you to have a marketing, not only a marketing person, director, but a marketing department. And
Right,
yeah, you know,
right. I mean, you're so right. You're hitting the nail on the head, which is exactly the point that I was tempted to underscore as well. That it's not just the opportunity, like when we try to give people and say, oh, hey, we can't pay you, but we're going to pay you in experience. And I've done my fair share of unpaid internships and have appreciated the experience in any of those projects. But it isn't just exposure isn't just enough for so many of our companies because we have to have the ability to build off of that exposure, to then move it further. But we're speaking the same language.
So, as we look at planning our next section, our next whatever, at True Colors, what does it look like?
Um, I'm not the biggest fan of the Zoom reading, so I think we're trying to find ways to innovate on that, right? Like, and to do it at our budget size, right? Like, I know that um, I think there is a perception, and we have to just own where we are in Atlanta. We're in the middle, right? Like, understanding that at of course, everyone can look this up on our tax documents, but at $1.5 million, we have resources. So I'm not going to say like, oh, we are broke and stuff like that. Like, we definitely have it. Of course, the pandemic has depressed that by about a third, but also there still provides us opportunity to do things. But as far as who our peers are in the market, they aren't necessarily the same budget size, right? Some of our peers in the market have 3 times the budget that we have when we're operating at our biggest, and some have 11 times our budget, right? That we are trying to compete with. So as far as our ability to compete now in a digital space for eyes and views and ticket buyers, um, we have to say, hey, maybe we don't have it. But what we know we corner the market on is the intersection of artistic excellence and civic engagement. So we have leaned more into our community conversation series, which is free to attend for everybody, but we're finding ways to do it and be very engaging on our digital platforms. We're trying to be intentional about our partnerships. Like, we did an art meets activism panel conversation with our friends at the Lincoln Center in New York, as well as Emory here in Morehouse and the King Collection, right? So it's about, for us, what's the digital content that we can do. We're going to roll out some digital virtual stage productions that we are still in the process of developing. But we also wanted to spend time. We need to reemerge out of this pandemic being the best version of True Colors we can be. As we gear up for our 20th anniversary season, we were already coming up on a strategic planning moment. And now it's about, hey, we have spent more time thinking about us. We weren't caught in the production cycle that makes it that much more difficult to improve your systems. Let's now emerge out of this thing as strong as we can be, also recognizing and giving ourselves grace that, y'all, we are in a pandemic and ain't nobody ever been through this stuff before. So we just got to manage our expectations on what our output can be, but our intention, we think, is in the right place.
And when do you think that Atlanta theater, or specifically you, will be back to normal?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Things that are impacting my decisions, maybe if I can pivot on the question. Um, you want to see more people getting vaccinated, um, so that we can reduce the percentage of people that are infected. Because I think
Right.
that'll help bring back patrons, but it also will help us as we work with Actors Equity, the union of stage actors, to sign off on the way we rehearse. Theater is such an intimate thing. People are asked often to be less than 6 feet away. Distance on stage communicates something. And if we aren't trying to communicate that these people are a distance or at odds with one another, well, we need them in proximity because that's the dynamics of the stage. So I'm not as interested in putting on a play where we can't have that intimacy because we're communicating something different to the audience. Um, so I'm looking for case counts to go down. I'm looking for relationships with the unions to improve where they feel confident that we're not putting actors. I mean, we're taking their safety into account and not doing anything too risky. I would love to see something outdoors come the fall, like a full production outdoors. But definitely, I think next spring and summer will probably be more likely than anything. True Colors, we're going to do a concert for Unity that we've collaborated with the Atlanta Opera on. It'll be both at the Cobb Energy Center and also at the Southwest Arts Center on Mother's Day. Southwest Arts Center on Mother's Day, the day before Mother's Day at the Cobb Energy Center. So that would be like our first like outdoor presentation of a thing, and we'll see how that goes. And we can see if we can try to do more outdoor stuff before it gets too hot here in Atlanta and before it gets too cold, because you know that seems to change weekly. We saw early survey responses from our audience that this was, you know, last summer, last fall, that they were uninterested in returning to live performance until they felt like the virus was gone. And our audience is our core audience, the people who have been with True Colors for 18 years, are 50 plus Black women. And studies show us that Black women are at a higher rate of contracting coronavirus, right? And having some adverse effects from it. So we can't put our core audience at risk just to do a show. One, they're not going to turn out, and if they do turn out, like that's extremely dangerous, and I wouldn't feel good about that. Also, you know, we're trying to recruit new audiences and things like that, but we also want to keep those populations safe as well. And we got to make sure that when we reemerge, that we've done it with enough thought, and we want to stay on top of the trends. So I think sometimes when you try to put an arbitrary date in there, now you're trying to jam your work into a container. Um, you know, had someone told us back in October that by May, everyone who wanted access to a vaccine that didn't even wasn't even a real thing yet could have it, we wouldn't know it. So if you were planning back in November for what May would look like, you would probably be off. So I'm trying to take that same patient approach in the return, but it is frustrating. I mean, I'm a producer. I want to produce theater, and that hasn't been what's possible.
When you do get back, will your season look the same?
Um, I think so. I mean, you know, our dedication to celebrating Black storytelling is always going to be the same. Um, this year, prior, I think we announced or we knew what our season theme for this year, 2021, was back in 2019. We came up with this idea of joy and pain, where we're going to celebrate what it means to be Black in America by helping people understand that those feelings for Black people are inextricable. Like, and because we can be somewhere and have that joyous moment immediately interrupted and bring about pain. And we also know what it feels like to be hurting, but to find joy and laughter for survival. We said that that is essentially what theater is, from its roots in Africa, but also to the laughing and crying mass that, you know, show us what theater is. Sock and Buskin, Shakespeare, tragedy and comedy, you know, Greek classics have that same type of thing too. So it's integral to theater. We knew what that season thing was back in 2019. Of course, the effects of the pandemic affected what type of shows we can produce. We know what the season theme we want for 21, 22, and moving forward. But the number of plays that we can deliver in that theme is probably going to change.
Now, you mentioned new audiences.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about getting new audiences when most of all of our audiences are the retired or close to retired
Right.
African American women who drag their husbands along sometimes? How do you please them in your programming and still make that change?
I think it's about speaking to the intention of it all. You know, when we talked about earlier that we thrive at the intersection of artistic excellence and civic engagement, we know that um, Black women are civically engaged, right? Like they have saved the presidency. They saved this president. They helped flip Georgia. They got Barack, you know, elected. So we know that older Black women in general, and young people, 40, 25 to 40, both care about the environment that they live in, the community, just to use that word. Those young people are so socially engaged about like hey, what does inclusion look like? What does LGBTQ plus issues look like? How are we talking about criminal justice reform and things like that? So we actually know that both of these audience care about the same idea and concept. Now, maybe one audience prefers a specific play style than the other. Maybe some prefer staying out in Southwest. Maybe some want to be inside the actual city of Atlanta. Those are the things that we are looking to. And as we diversify our program offerings and not just have the play where you got to buy tickets at a specific time, but we have those community conversations every Thursday on Instagram. I have a podcast series. What can we do to do like art at MARTA stations and things like that? As we just diversify how we deliver art, I think that's how we get those audiences. If we can go to somewhere where, and we perform at Ponce City Market, or we perform at West End Mall, and people are like, oh, okay, that's what this is. I didn't really know, or I didn't know. I forgot about it. I'm reconnected to it now. Maybe now more people want to travel to our home in beautiful Southwest so that they can be at the art center and get something that they either didn't know that they valued or didn't know existed.
I think that that's the challenge because, we've said in various town halls and other meetings that the youth are the next generation. We have to bring them in. And so many of them are interested in film and not theater. So we have to capture them. And so that has been I think the challenge overall.
Well, and I think they're interested in film because the films that they watch or the TV shows that they watch speak to them, right? Like, um, people loved Insecure, Issa Rae's show, because they saw in the performances things that mirrored and reflected back to them. Like there are playwrights writing that write for TV, that write for that type of engaged audience member. It's just that we got to be brave enough to produce them, and or we got to figure out where we put that show if we think that it may offend other people, right? Like we did a reading of a play um, called This Bitter Earth, and it had strong LGBTQ themes, and we recognize here in Atlanta that there's still people who aren't willing to accept that type of difference. So we say, hey, y'all, we're going to partner with this organization, Outfront Theater Company. They are one of the leading LGBTQ theaters here in the Atlanta metro area. And we're going to do the reading at their theater. We think all, if we tell all Black stories, this is an important Black story. If you are uninterested in hearing this story, well, then don't come to this show. You know what I mean? Like, it's not one of those things where you can say like, oh, how could you? You hoodwinked me into whatever, whatever, whatever. Like, we're gonna be very honest about where we are going. And if you're on the bandwagon, stay on. Here's where we're going. And if you're not, well, we appreciate you. We tell a plethora of stories. And if you like our storytelling in general, we'll come back to the next one. Every show isn't for everybody.
Choosing a season can be difficult. Speaking of which, how do you go about choosing your season?
Yeah, so for me, I really love things that have themes, right? Like thinking about what's happening in the world around us and how can we use art to speak to that. The first season I was a part of at True Colors, which was the 2018-2019 season, it was entitled Moments That Make the Movement. And we wanted to find plays that spoke to, these pivotal events in American history and really just kind of like pull at them. So one play that we did was Nina Simone, Four Women. And we're talking about, set in the church, the Birmingham church that the four little girls were murdered at. So we wanted to talk about in the time since then, where have we gone? What does protest look like? How does artists like Nina Simone, how do they speak to the protest movement? What advancements have we made? We talked about a play that was set in Detroit and the 2008 recession. What does economic impact mean with regards to race in American cities, especially a Black city like Detroit? So those types of issues and plays I'm thinking about when I think of a theme like moments that make the movement, or when we celebrated Black women storytellers, we called it She Griots. So now I'm looking for plays that tell the Black woman's story. With this one, Joy and Pain, what are the plays that navigate both of those things? What are the comedies about heavy, dark situations? What are the plays that allow us to just sit in the hurt and find some shared catharsis. So I start with a season theme, and then I go and I try to find the plays that speak to that from a variety of angles, so that we can tease it out over the course of the year. Again, like I said, every play isn't for everybody, but what we do hope is that if you see one of our three shows and you catch one of our community conversations, you would have received a full meal and you understand what we're trying to say about why we dedicated this season to celebrating joy and pain.
So, what is new on the horizon for you or for True Colors?
Right. Yeah. I would say for us, it's about getting back to being a leading storyteller of Black stories. We want to do more commissioning of new work by playwrights. Yes, we love going through the classics, and um, we want to do more of that as well. But right now, what I've seen in the American theater writ large are that predominantly white institutions, bigger white institutions, they're getting the first crack at new work by writers of color. And when you speak to those writers, they say, hey, the play that ultimately got on stage isn't really what I wrote, but I had to change some things because the audience may not have understood, or the producer didn't understand where I was coming from. So I looked at that, and because I have spent my entire career in new play development, I see that, I hear that, and I'm like, well, we're in a Black city, we're a Black theater company, we have a Black audience. We should get Black playwrights to come down here, make new work, so they don't have to feel like they had to leave something on the cutting room floor, or that their play gets lost in translation. It's like, no, we have a very smart, discerning audience that will take your work at face value. We'll hold up the culture. You just got to come and be an artist. So we're going to do a lot more commissioning in May. We're going to release one of our new commissions, Adaye Moon, local writer. He was the first ever artist I got a chance to commission as artistic director here. We put together like a digital play for him. We're going to release that. Gabrielle Fulton Ponder as another local writer. Hers will come out probably in June. Trey Anthony is another local writer. We're going to have hers come out in July, and we're doing that in partnership with a theater out in Canada called Soul Pepper. So those three writers we've commissioned, given them some money, and asking them to come back and create some new work for us.
One thing we haven't talked about. So, you've been the artistic director for 2 years, and you came in following the founding artistic director. And I know that there were changes that you made, and yet also you had to, I'm assuming, you had to also take what was there and add to it rather than change it. So, how do you find going from one theater to another theater and making your stamp when another stamp is already there?
I was really lucky. So I'm a part of like this cohort. Actually, we have a meeting today at 3 of like artistic directors who are within their first to fourth years, right? Because they kind of say like, hey, you need your first 3 years as an artistic leader to kind of figure out the lay of the land. So we are all kind of part of this collective. I'm lucky enough that I served as associate artistic director for 2 years under Kenny before assuming the lead role. It was after my first year that we made the announcement that I would be taking it over. So year 2 as associate really was spent doing that, like the tour, getting to know people. It's like, hey, here's the future leader. Kenny, introducing me, putting me in spaces. Like, here's the future leader, get to know him. I think because I had that experience of working with Kenny, and I've known Kenny all my career. He's been the first mentor that I ever had as a professional artist. I knew I got a chance to know what True Colors had been, and the love for Black artists, and especially artists who have had careers in TV and film and who want to return back to the stage for
Mhm.
performance. I know that Kenny and Jane in their founding vision wanted to provide Atlanta with a theater company that centered the Black narrative, but wasn't exclusionary in their offerings. So wanted to make sure that everyone felt at home, which is really, a testament to the 90s and 2000s and that kind of movement. I also knew that we were a theater company with a really rich following because of Kenny's work at the Academy Theater, at the Alliance, Jumanji, and ultimately in founding True Colors 16 years ago when I took over. So I knew that history. But also, what I was telling you earlier, I speak to contemporary playwrights all the time, and they talk about their struggles. I look at the way Atlanta is changing and who is coming into town, what they look for, why they're coming to the Black Mecca. So, okay, how can I speak to that? And because I'm part of that bridge generation, um, I know what my mama and them want to hear, and I also know what my peers and the people coming up under me want to hear. So I'm in a unique position to be able to find stories to talk to them. Uh, so just to make the long story short, I think it's having spent time here, knowing what the culture was, seeing where Atlanta culture is going and American theater culture is going, and now being the bridge to get us from that to the new thing. I'm giving you all the exclusive here, but our next seasons are going to be called our Sankofa seasons. Sankofa is an Adinkra symbol and in a West African um, language. The idea of Sankofa is to a journey forward begins with a glance back. What we're going to be focusing on over the next 3 years as we span our 20th anniversary with our 19th and 21st anniversary seasons. We're going to go back on, hey, what is Black theater history? What is True Colors history? What is Atlanta history? And then as we make that bridge to the 21st season in 2023, 2024, we're saying, what type of theater company do we want to be when we get there? These next 3 seasons, we're going to really show people the full breadth and depth of Black storytelling in Atlanta and what True Colors brings to it.
As we kind of come to our close, what is it that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about?
Ooh, what is that we haven't talked about that we need to talk about? Oh man, I don't want to get you in trouble, Brenda.
You cannot get me in
Um,
trouble. I have the editing button.
well, one thing I will say is that, like, again, this is me being a transplant, so I say that with you know, I open with that. But I moved to Atlanta to be part of a Black Mecca, and I realized that in the art space, man, we lack that diversity, and it's sad. It's heartbreaking, really. It does not do me any good to have our city represented saying that 54% of the people, but only 12% of the plays. That type of stuff hurts. Um, and I want us to be intentional about the way we do it. I don't want us just to go and quickly fix it and say, okay, hey, we're going to do all these plays. So actually, have we actually spent the time in wondering why and how we have hurt artists in all of our spaces, True Colors included? How have we hurt artists? How have we hurt our patrons? How have we let people down? Does our leadership reflect our values? Are we putting into our budgets the things we say we value? Because if you're not spending money on it, you may not value it the way you think you do. So that's what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that True Colors can be part of that conversation, but we're not willing to shoulder everybody's burden in order to move the community forward because we have art that we want to celebrate. And our mission is not to be in service to other organizations so that they can absolve themselves of guilt. Our mission is to celebrate Black storytelling while giving voice to bold artists of different cultures. So that's what we want to do. We want to celebrate the specificity of our story and use it as a way to bring and invite more people in to share their stories alongside of us. So um, That's what I'm hoping for in this moment, right? Like it's times, you get navel gazing, you only do the work at True Colors, but as I open back up and I look around, I hope that everyone is doing the work because our city deserves it, our patrons deserve it, our artists deserve it, and we'll be such a richer community because of it, and we won't have to feel so much like little brother, little sister to the film and TV world because more people will see themselves in the art and want to get inspired by it. And we could see film and TV having its value, but theater holding its own and having its value because there's nothing like the live experience.
If you had something that you would tell your younger self about where you are today or advice, what would you tell your younger self?
Hmm. What would I tell my younger self? I would tell my younger self um, to continue to believe in your value. I, over the course of my life, have not. I've I've oscillated between um, pushing past people's expectations of me and then trying to keep myself safe inside of environments by being the person that they want me to be. Um, and I have found that every time I push past people's expectations and seek out what I feel is best for myself, it's always been rewarding. When I stay in the box people have inside of me, yeah, there's some rewards to it, there's some safety around it, but ultimately that box becomes limiting. And on this other side, it's limitless. When I push past the boundaries, it's limitless. I probably encourage myself to desire to be limitless, um, and because that'll get you where you want to be more than anything else.
And if you had to um, express in one word to Atlanta where we should be.
Mm-hmm. I think my word would be equity. I think what's challenging about that is that everyone doesn't define it the same, right? Uh,
Okay.
you know, equity, I think, in its purest form means justice, and there is, um, I think Dr. Cornell West said it, and I don't know if he was quoting somebody else, but um, justice is what love looks like in public. And he was talking about specifically just what we see with so many unarmed people of color being harmed by the police. And I think that's what I would want for Atlanta. That um, equity also for me means like, you know, representation in that sense that like everyone gets what they need. Equity doesn't say that it's all equal, because like if if you get $500 and I get $500, that doesn't necessarily serve us the same way in the same work, right? But like equity means that we all get a chance to have equal access to things. That means, well, for you, you might need $7,000 to get where I can get with $500 because of the things that I have around us. So as far as how does that mean with the arts, um, equity could mean a year where every theater over $1 million gives their venue over to theater companies without, to allow them to produce at a larger stage and a larger space, and then continues to support them with other resources. And we go and we lobby big funders to say, hey, for this year we're going to do less so that this theater company can do more, and then we're going to continue to support them for the next X number of years so that they have the resources that they need to continue to do something like this more consistently. um, I'd love to see that, man. Wouldn't it be so great if we had several thriving theater companies, as opposed to a few named ones and then other ones that are grit gritting teeth in it and just trying to survive.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Jude, for joining us today. I appreciate it. And for my audience out there, please continue to view us, to join us each week where we'll have a different conversation with another wonderful artist. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. And meanwhile, keep the conversations going.